Today on Cryptic Mass Guitar, I try to give you a little bit of information, but I know I'm going to upset some people who are just going to look at the thumbnail or read the title and then just get upset. But let's take a look at what is the difference between the Epiphone Les Paul Standard 60s and the Gibson Les Paul Standard 60s. First and foremost, this is just going to be talking. If you come back to the channel like tomorrow or the next day, I'm going to have a sound sample comparison where I play this guitar and then I play this guitar with the same like volume and tone and you know, pickup settings and the same amp settings, so you can kind of hear in like recorded instances what each one of these will sound like and the differences therein. I do want to give a promise here. I'm not going to tell you which one to buy. I own the Gibson. I've rented the Epiphone, but the one I play the most is the Murphy Lab Custom Shop 1960. And this, I would never tell anyone to buy because this is ridiculously expensive. I wish I had not bought this guitar expensive. I love it, but it's way too expensive. So that being said, I have to let you know, this is a guitar, this is a guitar. There are differences between both of these guitars. There's a reason why there's a certain pricing on this, and there's a reason why there's a certain pricing on this. Could both of these be a little more cost-effective? Absolutely. But the same thing with every other guitar manufacturer. So don't worry, there's not going to be an instance where I'm going to be like, well, this is not a guitar. I don't know what it is. I don't feel that way. If you own the Epiphone, the only thing that I care about if you own the Epiphone is if you like playing it. If you own the Gibson, the only thing I care about is if you like playing it. If you don't like playing it, you should look at another guitar. But if you like playing it and it gives you that feeling of you and your guitar against the world, there's nothing wrong with it. So like I said, there's not going to be any playing here, but I'm going to be taking the control cavity covers off the back. We're going to be taking a look at the potentiometers. We're going to be taking a look at the capacitors, which some people call the caps, which some people don't understand that cap is short for capacitor. We're going to be taking a look at the everything here. Now, hopefully I do not skip over anything like I did on the last video. Because I did that last video just like I'm doing right now after work, after a long day of work. So I'm going to start out with what I forgot last time, which was on line 3 of the differences. So the Epiphone here, the headstock angle is 14 degrees. The headstock angle on a Gibson is 17 degrees. So we've got a larger angle here on the headstock of the Gibson, not as much on the Epiphone. So with that being said, there's a few things that happens with that. Some things that are beneficial, some things that are probably beneficial but may not be beneficial as well. So because of the headstock angle on the Gibson, depending on the nut that you have, which Graphtec is perfectly fine, depending on how you tune as well. So if you tune down to pitch rather than up to pitch, things like that, there's a bigger chance of the slack from the post getting caught in your nut here. That's less likely, supposedly, on the Epiphone. I have not experienced tuning issues on either of these guitars. But because of the, we'll call it a relaxed angle on the Epiphone, that is technically less likely to happen. So that means on the Epiphone, there's a larger chance of better tuning stability. It also has a Graphtec nut. But it also means that there is less tension overall. Now, a lot of people, I don't know percentage-wise, but a lot of people will do what's called top wrapping to get a little bit more slinkiness and a little bit less tension in their strings. So if you are someone that likes less tension, that's a good thing for the Epiphone. If you're someone who likes a little more tension, means maybe you might want to up your string gauge a little bit. because even with putting the stop bar all the way down here on the Epiphone, I cannot match the tension that I have on the Gibson. All right, so now that we have that out of the way, let's get into the normal way that I do this. So we'll start the body, go up the neck to the headstock, and then we'll look at the controls and such. So, first and foremost, both of these have mahogany bodies. So it's a slab of mahogany with maple on top. Now, the Gibson is non-weight relieved. The Epiphone, as far as I can tell from specs, because that's also kind of hard to narrow down, is also non-weight relieved. So that means there's no routings inside the other side of the mahogany before they put the maple on top, other than the cavity for the controls and the channel for the pickups. The Gibson generally has a two-piece mahogany back. I know you're the only one in the world that has a single-piece mahogany. Gibson is extremely good at hiding their seams. The Epiphone, speaking of hiding things, now I tried to get this earlier on like a B-roll shot, so I'm probably not going to get this. But Epiphone, even on the back, if it is not a solid color and you're looking at the back, unless it's like some sort of dealer exclusive, they actually use a veneer. So this is not what the wood looks like. And I tried to get it earlier, but you can actually see the veneer. I will try and try and try. I do not think I'll be able to get it. But you can actually see where the end of the veneer on the back goes, and then you see the actual wood, I believe, unless it's a veneer on the sides, because I have heard they've done that in the past. But it's like a figured mahogany back, right? But that's not real. You can actually see the veneer here. They also use a veneer on the top. So it also simulates, like flame maple. So here's the big thing. If you like the way that your Les Paul looks, and it's a veneer, but you still like the way that it looks, does it matter that it's a veneer? The Gibson has a two-piece maple top. It is a double A flame. This is also a double A flame, but it is a double A flame veneer. Again, does that matter or not to you? But you can actually see it's less uniform because it's a double A flame rather than a triple A or quadruple A or the quad. But it is a real cap of mahogany here that is hidden by the body binding. Epiphone does this to hide the quality of the wood that is used, and as well uses it to hide the amount of pieces of wood they use. Again, does this matter to you or not? This is a guitar. This is a guitar. This might just have more pieces of wood than this, so that means there's more glue in this than this. Does that matter? Also, speaking of body binding, the Gibson uses the rope binding technique, which is labor intensive and cost intensive. So you're paying for that. Whereas you have a more cost effective body binding here. Some people will say in the past that it is painted on. I don't think so. But we do have body binding here that's put on in a more cost-effective manner. Now, over time, as the weather changes and it goes from cold to warm to cold to warm to cold to warm, and there's like different levels of moisture, eventually that finish will allow you to feel the binding in the body. So time will tell whether this is painted, but I really don't think so. Both of these have like a cream type binding. Both guitars have mahogany necks. They both have the 60s slim taper to them. Now, the Epiphone is ever so slightly thinner than the Gibson. Thinner around here. It's a little more uniform towards the top between the two. But when we're looking at the neck on the Epiphone, you'll actually see there's a joint right here for the neck. So that means that there's a piece of wood that goes from the nut into the body, but it meets this piece of wood, separate piece of wood on the bottom. Taking a look on the back of the Gibson, it's just one piece of wood. So this joint here does not necessarily mean that there is going to be like any separation or anything like that. It's more than likely used to actually reinforce the neck a little more. But it is something that is noticeable here and is done on most Epiphones. But it's noticeable because there's different colors between the neck and the other part of the neck that goes into the body. Both necks also use a short neck tenon rather than a long neck tenon, which the long neck tenon is generally used in like custom shop models, some one-offs, and actually the standard 50s from the way that the specs actually list the Epiphone version. The Epiphone has a bound Laurel fretboard here with purloined inlays. Now, this does not have the fret nibs. And there's going to be something that I'm going to say here, which will upset some people, and some people will call me a liar. But I'm going to preface what I'm saying by, I did not feel this on any other Epiphones that I've rented in the past. I have a Les Paul Special that I've rented that does not have this. However, these fret ends on this particular Les Paul Standard 60 they're very sharp. So, like, if I started going a little crazy, I might actually snag my finger on it. So, again, with any of the other Epiphones that I've rented in the past or have picked up and played, I've not experienced that, but I have to note it because I'm noticing it while I'm playing it. The Gibson here has a bound rosewood fretboard with acrylic inlays here, and this actually has the fret nibs on it. Now, when it comes to the fret nibs, or as some people call them, nubs or nubbies, I used to call them nubs or nibs, never called them nubbies because that's a little weird. Some people hate these. There is a sector of people who have experienced, I have to say this because I've never experienced it, and I literally just had, like, I think my collection was like 33 Gibsons, most of which had bound boards with the fret nibs on them. However, what some people have experienced is with the weather changes and stuff like that, with the board expanding or whatever wood here expanding, the fret nibs have come loose, and it caused like maybe the high E string to get caught in between the fret nib and the fret end. Similar to what would happen here, because this has sharp frets, if I started bending. So if I had bought this guitar and had it for a little while and the wood shrunk and expanded, then my high E string, when I bend, would more than likely get caught under the fret. So again, I haven't personally experienced it, but just because I haven't personally experienced it doesn't mean I won't eventually, and doesn't mean it has never happened. As stated earlier, both guitars have Graphtec nuts, which is fantastic. On the front of each of these headstocks, I'm not going to address the headstock shape on the Epiphone because it's an Epiphone. It's not a Gibson. There's a difference between the two guitars. Let them have their own identities. That's always how I've looked at it. If you have the Epiphone, you play the Epiphone, you like the Epiphone, who cares what the headstock looks like? It's a little longer, I guess, if that's going to be your complaint. But looking at the front of the headstock, you'll be able to see the inlaid Epiphone logo here and the silkscreened Les Paul model logo. Whereas on the Gibson, you'll see the inlaid Gibson logo and the silkscreened Les Paul model logo. I've never gotten an answer if the Epiphone is actually inlaid or not, because, I mean, you can see the indentations. You can actually feel the indentations on the Gibson where it's inlaid, whereas you can't really on the Epiphone. But nitro and poly are different. By the way, remember when I said I have a list and I try to follow that list and I always skip over something? Guess what I skipped? The Epiphone has a polyurethane finish, whereas the Gibson has a gloss nitro finish. See, folks, It just happens. Back to the front of the headstock. Both of these guitars here have the truss rod cover that says standard. The Gibson comes with a blank as well if you want to change it to be more historically accurate. The Epiphone here does have the bell type truss rod cover, so the 3-screw, where the Gibson has the 2-screw. On the back of the headstock here is where we're going to be able to take a look at the tuners. Now, this is where things get a little weird, because both of these are Grover Rotomatic tuners. They're both supposed to be the 18-1. However, there's a sizing difference here. I don't know if this is maybe just this is the metric version, which this shouldn't be metric. I mean it should be because of where it's made, and this is the imperial sizing. But you know, these are different. They feel different. It feels like the Grovers that are on the Gibson are a little thicker, whereas the ones on the Epiphone are a little thinner. I mean, I'll show a quick close up here of both of these. Like even like around the buttons, they look different. Like they have different markings. They both hold their tune. I don't know, but it is something, again, when you notice things, you have to make note of it. Also, looking at the back of the headstock, remember when I talked about scarf joints and different joints? The Epiphone here has a scarf joint. So if you actually take a look, that means there's a joint here for the headstock to go into the neck. The Gibson does not have that. Again, does that matter to you or not? It's not going to really cause issues. Scarf joints have been around for a very, very long time, but it's a difference between both of the guitars. The Epiphone has the gold top hat knobs with the silver inserts. The numbering here is a little lighter, and it does have the pointers, thankfully. The Gibson has gold top hat knobs with the silver inserts. Now the lettering here is a little different. I don't care. I just don't care. So we do have 2 volume and 2 tone. Both of the volumes, because people will ask, they are dependent. So that means if you have like your neck shut all the way off and you put it in the middle position, you're not going to get any sound. Both of them. We're going to start off by taking the control cover off of the cavity in the back here, and we'll take a look at the potentiometers on the Epiphone. So you'll note we do have CTS potentiometer. It looks a little weird because they're soldered coming out of the potentiometers, and then they're hooked up to a quick connect for the pickup. So the pickups on the Epiphone are quick connect. Doing the same on the Gibson, you'll see we have the CTS audio taper potentiometers. These are Gibson branded. They're still CTS, but they just buy them in bulk and have them Gibson branded. And they are all hand soldered. So we'll take another look here, and we'll take a note that the Epiphone here, the capacitor for the Epiphone is just one of those little generic red ones. And if we take a look at the capacitor on the Gibson, we have a larger orange drop capacitor. Now, you can learn how to solder. Orange drop capacitors in Canada are like $6 to $12 each. So if you wanted to change your capacitors because you felt that there's a better value or a larger sweep when it comes to using your tone control, you can do that, and it's inexpensive to do. And it's also very easy to do. You might burn your fingers a couple of times though. And yes, if your tone is set all the way, like if it's on 10, it doesn't matter what capacitors you have. I can't tell you how many people have told me that, like on Jacksons and stuff like that, I changed the capacitor out. Oh, it sounds better now. And they literally have their tone set to 10. We'll also make note here, both of them have modern wiring rather than 50s wiring. So that's just a question answered. The 50s for the Epiphone actually has 50s wiring, as far as the specs say. Now, with the control plate back on, let's do the same thing with the 3-way toggle switch, and I will say this is what the Epiphone looks like. and this is what the Gibson looks like. I don't have the information on the Gibson to say that it's a switchcraft, but I believe I've read in the past that it's switchcraft. Whereas the Epiphone, I've read that it's an Epiphone 3-way toggle switch. Does that matter to you? So the potentiometers and the 3-way toggle switch allow you to control the pickups. Now, in the Epiphone, we have an Epiphone ProBucker 3 in the bridge and an Epiphone ProBucker 2 in the neck. These are Alnico 2 pickups. The Gibson has the 61R and 61T, so these are now known as the 60s burst buckers. They're Alnico 5 pickups. Now we'll take a look at the bridges here. So on the Epiphone, we have the Epiphone lock tone bridge, which is sort of like a Nashville style. Not like a huge, bulky Nashville style, but it's sort of like a Nashville style. So you'll note that the saddles here, you have 3 facing in one direction and 3 facing in the other direction. That's just to help a little bit more with intonation. And on the Gibson, we have the ABR1 bridge. So you note that the first 2 saddles are facing a different direction than the other 4 saddles here. Again, that's to do with intonation, just with the top strings here, or the thicker strings. Just helps you get a little further back. Now, 2 things of note here. Number 1, the sizing on the Epiphone is metric sizing, whereas the sizing on the Gibson is imperial sizing. The reason that I'm saying that is, well, on the Epiphone, unfortunately, most of the Epiphone lock tone bridges that I have played, there's movement in the saddles, and they usually buzz a little bit on the saddle. So this one right here, it's really, I've tried to pick it up with this microphone here, but when I'm playing like the B string here, the saddle is vibrating and it's ringing. You'll only notice it acoustically, but it just means that over time, this is more than likely going to wear down, and this saddle here will more than likely be able to be pushed with your finger. So the reason I'm saying that the sizing is metric is because if you want to order a different bridge, a lot of people go with like Tone Pros or what have you. They're like 50 or 60 bucks. Sometimes they're cheaper, but you would just want to get metric sizing. And on the Gibson here, it's imperial sizing, because this is made in the USA. So the big thing here, if you do not like the ABR1 bridge, some people don't like the fact that these 2 saddles here are facing in a different direction than the other 4. So some people just look at that and it melts their brain, and like, not in a bad way or anything like that, but they would just like it to look a little more uniform. So at that point, you can just order another bridge. Again, Tone Pros, Faber, there's a whole bunch of different brands that make great replacement bridges. So if you want to do that, just make sure you're getting imperial sizing. The other thing of note here, and it is a sore spot for some Gibson USA owners, but I don't think anyone really cares for the most part, but for some people, they're a little upset. But if you take a look at how the bridge is actually connected to the body here on the Epiphone, and then the way that it's connected to the body on the Gibson, if you're not sure why I'm bringing this up here, I'll show you why. All right, so here is my Gibson 1960 Murphy Lab ultralight aging. Gibson Custom Les Paul Standard. So it's Murphy Lab, it's ultralight aging. Some people are getting a little curious over it. I probably can't now. I'm looking at the monitor for the camera, but yeah, I probably won't be able to pick it up. But there's like little aging spots and stuff like that, and like there's stuff going on with the body. I didn't think I would like it at all, and I fell in love with it. It's actually very comfortable and really neat to look at. But that's besides the point here. If you look at the ABR1 on the Custom Shop, you'll notice that it's drilled directly into the body, and there's a little pinwheel to actually adjust everything. So currently that's a custom shop reissue thing, or with some of the semi-hollow bodies like the ES335. I'm not sure for the 339, more than likely it is, but they're drilled directly into the body at that point. It's considered, because it's a reissue thing, that's why it's set like that, so it's considered a premium. So the reason I say that some Gibson USA players are a little upset over that, or it's a point of contention or what have you, is because these are they are moderately expensive, and at a certain point, you do feel like, I paid a lot for that guitar. I wish they would have drilled it into the body. But both of these actually use a metal doweling system, so there's like a metal bushing that goes in via a dowel in the body. And that's kind of how everything's set up. Like because of the sizing, so metric versus imperial, it's just a little thicker on the Epiphone than it is on the Gibson. And for the most part, the only way that that's kind of noticeable to me is because it's the same thing on the stop bar, and the hole here for the stop bar is a little recessed on the Gibson, whereas it's protruding from the body on the Epiphone, so that means you can't get your stop bar down as far as you can on the Epiphone that you can on the Gibson. So that also plays into the amount of tension that you can get in your strings if you are someone that likes it, and you know that you can just lower the stop bar as close as you can to the body to get a lot more tension. And they also have different strap buttons. I'm not going to show that because people always ask that when it comes to SGs, not Les Pauls. I don't know what's wrong with SG players. I've never decided. I own quite a few SGs, and I've never asked about the strap buttons, because you can just change them, and most people just get strap locks. And the last thing that I'll bring up here is what comes with the guitar. Now, in the past, I've checked on the Epiphone Les Paul Standard 60s, and at some points here and there, like on Sweetwater or what have you, it'll say it comes with a gig bag. But when I rented this, I asked about it. I said, does it come with any type of case? And they said, well, we can get you one because it doesn't come with a case. So if you own an Epiphone Les Paul Standard 60s and it came with an Epiphone branded gig bag, leave that in the comments, because really Long and McQuaid sometimes in Canada, not the best for information or wanting to go, especially the store that I went to. It's not the normal store that I go to. It's you mean I have to go in the back and check if it came with something? No. So as far as I know, this comes in cardboard, like a box. Whereas the Gibson comes with a hard shell case. So before I actually open the case and show you what comes with it, I have to note the Epiphone is a little more cost effective because it doesn't come with a hard shell case. So if they were to throw in a hard shell case, they'd more than likely up the price $50, $100, $150 for an Epiphone branded hard shell case. So just know this and what's inside is built into the price of the guitar. So there's going to be things in here that you're going to be like, I would not care if I had that whatsoever. You might go, that would be handy, but you're paying for it. I mean, you're not paying retail for it, but it's built into the price of the guitar. Here's the inside of the case. So here's what comes with the guitar. Now, this has and can change, and the reason I'm saying that it can and has changed because, apparently midway through 2023 they stopped including the baby photo, which, like, in all honesty, who cares? A lot of people love this, but like even then, man, like I've never really known if that's the actual guitar or if it's like, looks close enough, just say it's that. But they stopped including the picture of the guitar on the workbench. We also have a leather strap that does not have a whole bunch of grip on the inside. but it's still a leather strap. And here is the alternate truss rod cover, like I did state, just the blank to be a little more historically accurate if you wanted. And we have what Gibson USA will call the certificate of authentication. Oh, wow, you can't speak. I need sleep. But it's just going to tell you the serial number, model number, the date that it was actually made. So this was October 10th, 2020. And who actually inspected it and all that stuff. We have the keys to the case, and then the accessory kit. So inside here, you'll note that I don't know that I've actually opened this before. I probably did. We have the Gibson branded multi-tool. So this has a whole bunch of things that allow you to adjust certain things like your truss rod, intonation, a whole bunch of other things that aren't typically found on this guitar. We have a warranty information pamphlet. We have an owner's manual, and we have a Gibson branded polish cloth. It's 2025. The guitar was made in 2020. Still in the packaging. So that's what comes inside the case for the Gibson. So again, everything and the case is built into the price of the guitar. So everything extra that they've thrown inside the case, you're paying for, whether you like it or not. You can't go to the store and go like, take 30 cents off if you knock out and take the polish cloth, because I'll never use that, but I will save 30 cents. You can't really do that. So, does it matter to you whether or not you have a hard shell case? Or, you know what I mean? Like, it's not built into the price. And, like, there are really good padded gig bags out there that are inexpensive. There's also no-name hard shell cases that are very good. They're great quality that are inexpensive. So, does it matter? I mean, you can probably get a stencil or something like that that says Epiphone on it. Just don't try and pass it off as authentic. That's a sore spot for some Gibson players. So that's it. Those are the differences. There's a few things that I do want to bring up. Not very many. But when it comes to the Laurel fingerboard, first and foremost, most people who have bought an Epiphone since they've moved over to the like inspired by Gibson line. Oh wow, that's what IBG means. Wow. So most people will tell you, oh mine's special. It actually has a rosewood fingerboard. The reason that they keep saying that is because the Laurel that they used in the past, most guitar manufacturers used in the past, most of them used to use Granadillo when Granadillo when rosewood was scarce, or even, like in the 90s, it was actually more cost effective to use ebony. Whereas that's always treated as a premium nowadays, and the alternate for ebony, I think, is Richlight, isn't it? Anyway, most guitar manufacturers have kind of figured out where to source their Laurel from. So it's when you're playing on the Laurel fretboard now, it feels a lot more like rosewood than the weird cardboardy, super flat feeling that you got with the old Laurel. I've experienced a few of those, but nowadays the Laurel that they've sourced now, like there's a lot more to the grain, there's a lot more pores and stuff like that in the wood. So when people say, oh yeah, mine actually has rosewood on it, it says that it's Laurel, but it's rosewood. It's actually Laurel, but they've sourced better Laurel. So to me, that's perfect. I don't sit there and play the guitar and go like, oh yeah, you can tell that it's Laurel and not rosewood, because it's not weird, flat, and cardboardy feeling like the old stuff used to be. The next point that I have to bring up is, like I did state and hopefully was able to show you properly, the veneers that Epiphone uses. It's usually to hide two things: what the actual wood looks like, whether if that matters to you or not, and the amount of wood that they're using. So it's not uncommon to have like 3 or 4 piece body on an Epiphone. Again, does that matter to you? These are the questions that you have to ask yourself. Like, I'm saving money. It sounds good. Does it matter? But the other thing of note here, and it's very important, like when you look at the Epiphone website with the specs, there's this little thing underneath that says these specs could change at a moment's notice, or whatever it says. The reason they have that is so before, when they would say they used rosewood fretboards, it just had to be in the rosewood family. Same thing when they say it's a mahogany body. It's more than likely mahogany, but it also could just be in the mahogany family. It could be that they've got NATO is when it's finished in poly. NATO is a good alternate, and it might have been that they got a really good deal on some NATO, which is in the mahogany family, and that's what it is. So that also means that the weights on the Epiphone guitars could have a little more variance than the variance that's in the wood in a Gibson USA. So if you look, like, Sweetwater is always the best place. If you want to ask me how much a guitar weighs, just go to Sweetwater. If they have a couple in stock, they'll say, we have these 4 in stock. This is how much this one weighs. This is how much this one weighs. If you look at the Epiphone stuff, oftentimes it's a little more than a pound difference. I mean, you'll find, like, oh, these are, say, like 6 or 7 pounds or something like that. But there's the odd one that's like, it's 8 pounds or it's 9 pounds. Like the Gibson, that one there is 9.9 pounds. I own that one, so I've weighed it in the past. I'm not going to weigh the Epiphone. It's lighter. It's not as heavy as the Gibson. So that might be a plus if you don't like heavy guitars. But that is something that Epiphone has done in the past. As long as it's in the family, then it's fine. Tuners in the past, it'll say like we're Epiphone branded or we're Grover branded tuners, and I've rented some where that's what it says, and it actually says right on it Wilkinson. So could just be that maybe they didn't have the Grovers, or they got a really good deal on the Wilkinson stuff. I think that's few and far between nowadays. But it has happened in the past. Like the Epiphone Les Paul Custom that I rented, which I'm going to rent again. I'll rent a different one. Probably 2 different ones. I want to get the white one just to try it out. Will more than likely have Grovers on it. But the one that I rented said Grovers in the specs, and then it was Wilkinson. Does that matter? They felt great. And another thing when it comes to the woods that are used and stuff like that. So you also have to treat it as the stock type of wood that they get and the allowances that they have for, what woods. Allowance is probably the specs they need to meet, the criteria they need to meet for their specs for the wood. So when it comes to Epiphone, it's usually because it's made in China, so they have different sources of their wood, so the cost is kept down because of that, and they have a higher variance of what they can use. Again, it's in the family of what's listed, so the quality of the woods can vary. And I don't want to say quality as in like, oh, it's going to be bad wood, don't buy an Epiphone or anything like that. It just means the weight of the wood, and like the grain types of the wood, they don't matter as much on the Epiphone stuff because they use veneers and such, and they have that tagline on their website that this could change this could change, the specs could change. When it comes to Gibson USA have their own spec variances. So what that means, especially with the Gibson custom shop, kind of down the street or in the same area. So there's specs criteria that they have to meet for their spec, for their custom shop. So the custom shop stuff is all like 1-piece mahogany, 2-piece maple, that kind of stuff. Solid mahogany for the 57 Les Paul Custom and the 54 Les Paul Custom, which I still want to get, I have to get. But that's the thing too. Like when a lot of people, they'll argue to the death that their SG is a one-piece body. It does happen with the SGs because they'll get in a large enough piece in the custom shop, or it could be a large enough piece that they thought could go to the custom shop, and then it doesn't meet the spec for the custom shop, so they go, okay, well, it's not lightweight mahogany, or it doesn't meet this, so let's send it to Gibson USA, and they'll just save money on glue. That kind of a thing. So when it comes to the Gibson USA and the Gibson Custom Shop, it means that they have to pay someone to actually sort and individually weigh, even though they are sourcing that material specifically for, oh, this is specifically going to go to Custom Shop, this is specifically going to go to USA. They have to make sure that it meets that criteria, so they have to pay someone to do that. And you're paying someone in the US rather than paying someone in China, so that means that there's a larger cost involved. So you have to look at the sourced wood, and the spec'd wood has to meet certain criteria to be used, so that is built into the price of the guitar. And also, typically the metals that are used in the hardware for Epiphone isn't, I don't want to say it's cheap because it's not, except for the bridge. The bridge on an Epiphone, the Epiphone lock tone bridge, I just personally haven't experienced one that doesn't buzz or doesn't feel like eventually it's just gonna move on its own. You'll be able to push it instead of use the thread for the screws. So the material that they use is just a little bit lighter. I don't think it's pot metal or pop metal, but it's not as high quality as the stuff that's used for Gibson. So all of that has to be taken into consideration. So that's it for like all of the differences and the like little, like, oh, I have to say this about Epiphone, because at the end of the day, when you look at this guitar from a distance, it looks like this guitar. I mean, different colors, right? Get a veneer that helps it look a little more like this. And you still look at them and go like, well, they look so similar. There has to be some sort of... So that's why I'm saying that stuff. So, with all that being said, I still don't care what you play, as long as you like it. I've always had this feeling from when I was like 12 to 14, where it literally felt... And I played like an Ibanez... Flying V, the PR 1600 or PS 1600, no, PR 1600, it was the Pro Series PR 1600, was labeled as a rocket. No, I can't remember what it was. It actually had Flying V in it, even though it was a Gibson trademark. But that guitar and Little Ryan literally felt like it was me and that guitar against the world, and I could do anything with that guitar. So I still have fond feelings about that guitar, and like I do say this in the comments from time to time just to get my point across, and it is something like this is legitimate here. So my budgets over the last 30 years, I've gone from like $200 budgets to $10,000 budgets on a single guitar. That's not like a, oh, beat my chest, look, I've paid $10,000 for a guitar, because to be honest, if you look at it, what else could I have bought instead of that guitar? Right? A lot of people would think I'm foolish for that. I could completely understand. But I've had that budget. I've had the 200. I've had the 10,000. And the feeling I get when playing the $10,000 guitars, it's fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. To me, it's life-altering. But I'll never, ever forget that feeling of playing that $300 used Ibanez Pro Series PR 1600 or 1600 or 1660, the Flying V, the Road Style V, because it literally felt like me and my guitar against the world. So whether you play the Epiphone or whether you play the Gibson, I really just hope that you have that feeling of it's you and your guitar against the world. And that should be all that matters. Thanks for watching.